they told me I was gonna manage the Road Warriors, I was just like blown away. I mean, because come on, it's their best tag team that ever lived, you know. And for me to be able to walk down that aisle to that music with those guys was just, it was like a dream come true. It was one of the highlights of my career, absolutely. And Joe and I actually, because basically, Hawk and Animal used to travel together. With Steve Blackman used to ride with them too. But once I started working with them, there was four of us in the car, so we were a little cramped. We would take two cars, so it was always me and Animal and Hawk and Steve Blackman. And because Joe and I spent so much time in the cars together, we became such good friends. We became like brother and sister, and to this day we still are. His family's my family. We talk a few times a week. He'll always be such a close person in my life. I'm so lucky to have him in my life. He's a really, really good, genuine person. If anybody ever gets a chance to meet him, you'll see that. And he's fabulous, and I thank God every day that I have him in my life. I mean, because we weren't called divas when I was there. But when you think about it, we like I was the first one, then Terry came in second, then Rena came in third. We were pretty much the three that started the whole diva thing, because before us, you had Miss Elizabeth, who was a wonderful person, God rest her soul. I loved that woman. But she was basically a valet at ringside who stood there and looked pretty, never opened her mouth, never wrestled, never did photo shoots, things like that. So she was a very one-dimensional character. Then you had Sherry Martel and Alundra Blaze, who fit that wrestler, category. So they weren't the divas per se, because they weren't doing the bikini photo shoots. They weren't co-hosting TV shows. They were just strictly wrestlers. And when I came along, it was the time that it was basically Vince was like, wow, we have a girl that can look this way, do this job, do that job, basically do any job they put in front of me. I did. I mean, I did color commentary, play by play. I wrestled, I refereed, I managed, I co-hosted TV shows, I hosted my own TV shows. Everything I did was off the cuff and ad lib. Not once did they ever give me a script for anything. Not even the shows that I hosted, like the Saturday morning shows and Live Wire on Sundays. That was just off the top of my head. Never once did I have a script for anything. Even when I got slopped, the 10-minute promo I did in the ring before I got slopped, that was right off the top of my head. And then the bikini photo shoots, and then the merchandising. That's when, Vince was finally like, wow, we finally have a girl that we can do so many different things with instead of being so one-dimensional. And in fact, I think that's really when the whole diva thing originated. Was the way I define diva is like that all around, like, well-rounded performer. You can pretty much do anything they throw at you. Okay, granted, the divas nowadays, they can't always do all that very well, but they still give them those jobs to do. But that, I think that's the entire difference. And like now, like I said, there's some girls out there that have a lot of talent, some not so much. Don't ask me for names, because I already get myself in enough heat all the time with the West Wrestling websites, but saying too much about what I think of some of the girls there. So but yeah, it's at least what they had me do, open the doors for so many girls to do so many more things instead of just being labeled a wrestler or a valet. And I actually hate that word. I hate the word valet. It shouldn't even exist. You're a manager or you're not. He hated what they had him do. He hated the whole Skip character. He knew his talent, and he was being held back big time. Mainly, a lot of reasons was because of his size. And they always held that against him, because back then we had a lot of big guys. And if you look at it now, the majority of the guys are smaller. Like, he was way before his time. If he was still around today, he'd probably be on the same level with CM Punk. And, he could carry, and Chris Benoit, and they could carry the strap just like all the smaller guys have done. But back then, he was really, really held back. And he knew what his abilities were, and he was just so aggravated that he wasn't given that chance to actually show it. He was one of the better workers on the entire roster, but he never got the chance because of his height. I mean, he was 5'8", and back then that was really short. Now 5'8" is like average, compared to everybody else that's there. Yeah, you do have your few beasts, but a lot of the guys are a lot smaller. But he hated it. And, he really wanted to go to work for ECW, because he had known Paul Heyman since they were like 9 years old. They used to sell programs together on shows. So Paul said, come over to my company. I'll give you the matches you want to have. You can show your talent, show what you can do. And, you'll be Chris Candido. You won't be Skip, and you can do whatever gimmick you want to do, which turned into no gimmicks needed, that he didn't need a gimmick. He could get over just being himself. So it was kind of funny one day. He was so frustrated at TVs. He walked up to Vince McMahon. He goes, Vince, that's it. I quit. I can't do it anymore. And he's like, well, Skip, you need to put that in writing. He's like, all right, I'll be right back. He walked up to Jim Cornette, grabbed his notebook, ripped a piece out, and wrote, to Vince, I quit. Chris Candido, and handed it to Vince McMahon. That's how he quit. And Vince was like in shock, but Vince was looking at him like, are you sure, kid? Chris goes, you said you needed a writing. Here's your writing. I'm out of here. So he proceeded to take a couple of party favors, um, i.e., like a little muscle relaxer to get a little happy during the TV taping. And it was funny. He was sitting on a crate because he had already quit the company. He didn't care what he did. So he took a pill to relax, and he actually. And walking down the hallway, he actually bumped into and completely knocked over Sable right under the ground because he was all wobbly. And it was great. It was priceless. It was fantastic. We loved it, every minute of it. That was kind of funny because I wasn't even there when the comment was made. We did the TV, and I had a lot of control in the company at the time. So when I was done, I didn't have to hang around to the end of the show. I could leave, and I could show up late. I could leave early. I basically could do whatever I wanted. And I show up the next day, and I see the seamstresses and then makeup girls like, "Oh my God, did you hear what Shawn said last night?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then they told me. Now this is what happened. Shawn and I had just split up when this happened. Now, the whole time I was with Shawn, Shawn and Bret always hated each other, but they hated each other even more because of me. I was a big part of that hatred. Um, on the road, Bret Hart he is the lone wolf. He likes to be alone. He doesn't like to be around people. He doesn't like to be around the boys. So for most of the towns we were in, there'd be two locker rooms, one locker room for 30 guys and one locker room for me. And they were pretty much the same size locker rooms. So Bret and I had always gotten along great. I was like the Hart family babysitter. The whole family loved me. So Bret used to change in my locker room. So it was basically all the guys, and then Bret and Sonny had a locker room. So of course rumors would start. Why is Bret always in my locker room? Even when I was dating Shawn would always be like, why is he in her locker room? I don't want him in there. I'm like, he's just changing in there. When he would have to change, I would leave. When I would change, he would leave. There was nothing going on whatsoever. But of course, Shawn thought there was something going on because we were sharing the locker rooms and they hated each other. And then as soon as Shawn and I split, that was like the perfect opportunity for him to get that jab into Bret, especially with Bret's family there watching. So he made that Sunny Days comment, and I found out about that. And of course, it's caused a big thing with Bret and his family. I had to call his wife immediately, who I was very good friends with. And I said, Julie, I said, I hope you know nothing's going on with Bret. She goes, oh, I know. Shawn's just an asshole. He's just making that up. And I said, I would never do that to your family, because I was very close with the entire Hart family. And, she totally believed me, which was great, thank God, because I was worried about that. But, Shawn and I were not seeing each other anymore, but he was still very, very jealous and possessive over me. He didn't want anybody around me, even though we weren't seeing each other anymore. So the fact that Bret was still in my locker room totally ticked him off, and that's where that comment came from. So yes, nothing ever happened to clear the whole rumor thing. Nothing ever happened with Bret Hart. Nothing at all. Just Shawn. It was January 10th, 2011. It was Monday night. I was actually packing to go to Mexico the next morning on vacation. And Johnny Ace, John Laurinaitis, and I have been friends since 1995. We were friends when he was working in Japan with Chris, and then when he first came into the WWF in 98, he and I used to travel together sometimes, so we were friends for a long time, and every so often he would call me just to, chit-chat a little bit. And he called me, it was around 9:30. Well, actually, first he texted me. He's like, hey, can we talk? And I said, sure, when? And he said, now. I said, all right. I'm thinking it's Monday night, 9:30. He's at Raw and he wants to talk on the phone. What's going on? So I called him up. I'm like, what's up? And for 15 minutes, we're just like bullshitting about nothing, about the weather. He's asking me about my Mexico trip. And I'm like, this is really not like him, because most of our phone calls will be like 2-3 minutes tops. And now we're talking 15 minutes about nothing. So he's like, hey, are you watching Raw? I said, well, I actually have it on, but I was packing for Mexico, so I wasn't paying attention. He's like, well, sit down and pay attention right now. I said, okay. As soon as I sat down, here comes the whole video package for Shawn getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. So I watched the video package while I'm on the phone with Johnny, and I was like, you know what? That's amazing. If anybody deserves it, it's Shawn. I'm so happy for him, blah, 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 blah. And Johnny goes, well, let me tell you why I actually called. I'm like, oh, finally. After 20 minutes of, talking about the weather, he's finally going to tell me why he called. He goes, Vince and I were discussing it, and we'd like you to be the second inductee. And I went, you're shitting me, right? He goes, no, we're not. I'm like, come on. I said, this is the meanest joke, prank rib you could ever pull on me. Please tell me you're me. He goes, no, Tam, I'm not you. We want you to be the second inductee ever. And I went, the tears started streaming and I was a crying mess and I lost it. So for like 15 minutes, he's laughing at me while I'm crying like a baby on the phone. So he's telling me, okay, you got to keep it really quiet. You can't tell anybody. He's like, you can tell your boyfriend. Don't tell anybody else until we announce it on Monday Night Raw. I said, well, when is that going to be? He goes, I don't know yet. He goes, but I'll call you in the afternoon so you'll know when to watch. He goes, but you can't say a word about it until we announce it on TV first. I'm like, okay. So I hang up the phone. I'm like, oh my God. I got to tell somebody. So my boyfriend was at his mixed martial arts class and he never brings his phone in. So I couldn't tell him. I'm like, what do? I have to tell someone. I was like running around the house in circles like a chicken without a head. So I called up my personal photographer, Bob. He's actually like Uncle Bob, I call him. And I told him, so he and I are screaming like, 16-year-old girls on the phone. And then I'm like, I could not believe it. And, so I figure, okay, they picked Shawn to be the first and they just announced him. I figure I'll be the next announcement next week. No, the bastards make me wait from January 10th to March 7th before I get over my mouth. 2 months, I had to keep this to myself. I keep it quiet. And I'm like ready to explode. Every time I see somebody, I'm like, and guess what? I can't say anything because knowing them, if the word got out, they could pull it just as easy as they gave it to me. So I had to be really, really careful that I didn't spill the beans to anybody, and they killed me. So I was the second one they chose, and I was the second to last one they announced on Raw. It was driving me crazy. But I honestly didn't even believe it the whole time, and I said to myself, I'm not going to believe it's actually going to happen until I see that announcement on Raw. So of course, for 2 months, I'm like, oh my God, again, it's not me. It was a total rip. They're finally going to tell me in like June that it's not going to happen. It was driving me crazy. So, but then I finally got the call that afternoon. Johnny's like, okay, tonight's the night. So my boyfriend and I and a bunch of friends, we all decided to go to Buffalo Wild Wings. I don't know if you guys have Buffalo Wild Wings out here. It's like a chain restaurant for wings. We all went there because they have these big screen TVs everywhere. And we had a bunch of fans actually came up, put it on Facebook. I said, hey, we're going to watch my announcement tonight. Come meet us at Buffalo Wild Wings. So there was a ton of fans there. And they put it on every big screen in the place because we knew the manager. And of course, as soon as they start showing the video package, I'm crying like a baby. And I was just like, I was in shock. I couldn't believe it. And it was funny because when Johnny told me, he's like, no, we really want you to be in. Immediately, I started giving him every excuse why not to induct me. I'm like, don't you think I'm too young? Don't you think I still have more to do in my career? I was giving him every excuse in the book. But it was just a shock of a lifetime. Like I always kind of had a feeling in the back of my mind, eventually I might get in. But I had no idea at 38 years old, I'd be the youngest inductee ever. And because usually when you get inducted, you're either 50 or dead. You're not 38 and still active. So it was a pretty amazing thing. One of the most amazing things in my life was being told I was getting inducted, and then finally when I was inducted. And the whole weekend, WrestleMania weekend during my induction, it was so surreal that at the end of the weekend, I'm at the WrestleMania after party, and I'm like, did all this really happen? I'm like, oh yeah, I got the ring. It really happened. I was like my only proof because it just went so fast and it felt like a dream. But it was probably one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me. It was pretty awesome.